Ambassador stood at the observation window of Orbital Station 12, her 4 arms pressed flat against the cold glass. Below her, the beautiful green and blue world of 4 turned slowly in the light of its golden sun. 8 billion of her people lived down there. They were farmers, teachers, artists, and children. They had never known war. They had never needed to. For 3,000 years, the treaties had protected them. The neutral crescent was sacred ground. No species could bring weapons here. No fleet could threaten these worlds. The great powers of the Galactic Concordat had signed their names to this promise, and for 3,000 years that promise had held. But promises meant nothing to the. Watched them come. The first ship appeared as a dark spot against the stars, then another, then 10 more. Within an hour there were hundreds. They moved in perfect formation, black shapes that blocked out the light. They looked like a swarm of insects descending on ripe fruit. In a way, that was exactly what they were. There were harvesters. Other species built empires through trade or conquest. The simply consumed. They arrived at populated worlds, stripped them of all biological matter, and converted everything into fuel for their endless journey across the stars. They had done this for 10,000 years. No one knew where they came from. No one knew how to stop them. The comm system on the station began to flash with incoming messages. Staff looked at her with fear in their eyes. She was the senior diplomatic officer. She was supposed to know what to do. She did not know what to do. "Open a channel to the lead ship," she said. Her voice sounded calm. She did not feel calm. Standard greeting protocol. Her communications officer, a young male named, worked the controls with shaking hands. "Channel open, Ambassador." Took a deep breath. "Attention vessels. This is Ambassador of the Diplomatic Corps. You have entered protected space under the Treaty of Neutral Crescent. Please state your intentions and prepare to withdraw to the designated boundary zone." Silence. The black ships continued their approach. "Repeat the message," said. Repeated it, still nothing. Below knew the Planetary Defense Force was scrambling. 12 patrol ships. That was all they had. They had never needed a real military. Why would they? The treaties protected them. The great powers protected them. The great powers were not here. "Ambassador," said, his voice breaking. "They are not responding to any frequency. They are not responding at all." Closed her eyes. She had studied thee in school like all children. They were taught about the harvesters the way humans taught their children about natural disasters. They were a force of nature. They came, they destroyed, and they left nothing behind. The only defense was to not be in their path. 4 was in their path. "Send a priority distress call to all Concordat members," ordered. "Maximum encryption, all channels. Tell them we need immediate military assistance." Nodded and began typing. Around the station, other officers were crying. Some were praying to gods that no longer believed in. She could not blame them. She wanted to pray too. The first response came from the Republic within 2 hours. They were known for their massive battle cruisers and their proud warrior tradition. Surely they would help. The message was short. "We regret that we cannot assist at this time. Our fleets are engaged in defensive operations along the Rim territories. We wish you strength in this difficult hour." The Empire responded next. They were the oldest civilization in the Concordat, with technology that made other species look primitive. They had ended wars with a single demonstration of their power. Their message: the Empire does not engage with swarms. Historical analysis shows a negative outcome probability of 94.7%. We recommend evacuation of essential personnel. Evacuation. As if they could evacuate 8 billion people in the 72 hours before the harvesting began. The collective did not even bother with excuses. They simply sent coordinates to their nearest refugee processing center. "Come alone," the message said. "Bring nothing." One by one, every ally that they had trusted for 3,000 years turned away. The treaties meant nothing. The promises meant nothing. When the darkness came, everyone looked after themselves. Stood at the window and watched her defense force engage the enemy. 12 small ships against hundreds of massive harvesters. The battle lasted less than 4 minutes. 12 bright flashes, and then nothing. Ambassador said quietly, "What do we do?" Did not answer. She was looking at the communications log, scrolling through the list of species they had contacted. At the bottom was one entry marked, "No response expected." The humans. She had added them to the distress call as an afterthought. The humans were new to the galactic community. They had only developed faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. Most concordat species considered them a nuisance at best, a danger at worst. They fought among themselves constantly. They were emotional, unpredictable, and far too aggressive for civilized space. They were also on the other side of the galaxy. Even if they wanted to help, it would take them months to arrive. By then, 4 would be dust. But had nothing left to lose. She said, "I want you to send a direct message to the humans, to their central government, their military command, anyone who will listen." The humans looked confused. "Ambassador, they cannot help us. They are too far away. They are too weak." "I know," sat down at the communications console, "but I want someone to remember what happened here. I want someone to know that we called for help and no one came." She began to type. She described the situation simply and clearly. She told them about the 8 billion people waiting to die, about the allies who had abandoned them. She attached images of the children in the shelters below. She attached recordings of the concordat refusals. At the end, she wrote, "We do not expect rescue. We only ask that you remember us. Remember that the galaxy let us die. Perhaps, someday, you will be strong enough to make sure this never happens again." She sent the message into the void. Then she turned back to the window and watched the black ships descend toward her world, and she waited for the end that she knew was coming. On the surface below, 8 billion people looked up at the sky that had turned dark with death, and they held their loved ones close, and they wondered why no one was coming to save them. Help would never arrive. That was what everyone believed. Everyone was wrong. The countdown had begun. 72 hours. That was how long they needed to position their harvesting machines. 72 hours before the great engines fired and began to pull the atmosphere from the planet. 72 hours before every living thing on 4 was converted into fuel. In the capital city of, Prefect stood on the balcony of the government building and looked at the sky. The stars were gone. The fleet had spread across the heavens like a blanket of shadow. Somewhere up there, the harvesting rigs were moving into position. Massive machines that would drill into the atmosphere and begin the terrible process. "Prefect," his assistant called from inside. "The shelter reports are coming in." Turned and walked back into his office. The screens showed images from across the planet, underground bunkers filled with families, schools converted into emergency housing, hospitals preparing for injuries that would never be treated because there would be no survivors to treat. "How many are in the shelters?" asked. "About 2 billion, sir. The rest." The assistant's voice faded. The rest had nowhere to go. The shelters were never meant to hold an entire planet. They were built for natural disasters, for storms and earthquakes, not for extinction. Pulled up a map of the shelter network. Little blue dots scattered across the continents. Each dot represented thousands of people hiding in the dark, waiting for a rescue that would not come. "Any word from the Concordat?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. "No, sir. They have stopped responding to our messages." Of course they had. Why would they waste resources on the dead? Had been a soldier once long ago. He had trained for combat that he never expected to see. They were a peaceful people. They solved problems with words, not weapons. That was their strength. That was also their weakness. He walked to the window again. In the streets below, people were moving in quiet groups. Some were heading to the shelters. Others were going home to be with their families. A few were simply standing still, looking up at the sky, unable to understand what was happening. A child was crying somewhere. The sound drifted up through the open window, closed his eyes and listened. That child would never grow up. None of the children would. They did not care about age or innocence. To them, all life was simply raw material. His comm unit buzzed. It was Ambassador calling from the orbital station. "Prefect," she said. Her face on the screen looked tired and old. "I wanted to give you an update." "Is there any hope?" asked. Was silent for a long moment. "I sent a message to the humans. I do not expect a response, but I wanted you to know." The humans frowned. "They are months away, and they are barely more advanced than we are. What could they do against the—" "Nothing," admitted. "But I wanted someone to know, someone to remember." Nodded slowly, he understood. When you are about to die, you want to leave something behind, a message, a memory, proof that you existed. "Thank you, Ambassador," he said, "for trying." The connection ended, turned back to his work. There were supplies to distribute, panic to manage, lies to tell. He told his people to stay calm. He told them help was coming. He told them everything would be fine. He was lying. They knew he was lying, but sometimes lies were all you had left. The hours passed slowly, 60 hours remaining, 50, 40. On the orbital station had stopped sleeping. She sat at her console and watched the fleet on her sensors. The harvesting rigs were almost in position. Massive structures that looked like mechanical flowers, their petals pointed down toward the planet. Soon those petals would open and the extraction would begin. She had received no response to her message to the humans. She had not expected one. They were too far away and they had no reason to help. They had never done anything for them. The Concordat had treated the humans like children, patting them on the head and telling them to stay in their corner of the galaxy. Why would they risk their lives for strangers? 30 hours remaining, 25:20. Was about to close her eyes when her console made a sound she did not recognize. A warning alarm, but not one she had ever heard before. She looked at the screen and felt her heart stop. Something was happening to space itself. At the edge of the system, far from the fleet, a patch of stars was wrong. They were bending, twisting like light through broken glass. The sensors could not make sense of it. They showed impossible readings. Gravity waves that should not exist. Energy signatures that physics. Then space tore open. There was no other way to describe it. The fabric of reality split apart like cloth and light poured through the wound. Blazing, terrible light that burned across every sensor on the station. Alarms screamed. Systems overloaded. For one terrifying moment, thought they had developed some new weapon. Then something came through the tier. It was a ship. A massive ship, 3 kilometers long, made of black metal and covered with scars. It moved wrong, too fast, ignoring the laws of motion that governed normal vessels. It should not have been possible. Nothing should have been able to travel through that tier and survive. But there it was, wounded, burning, impossible, and heading straight for the fleet. Its comm system crackled with a transmission on all frequencies. A human voice, female, speaking words that would be remembered for 1,000 years. "This is Captain of the United Earth Ship Defiance. We received your distress call 19 days ago. We came as fast as we could." 19 days. They had crossed half the galaxy in 19 days, through a dimension that should have killed them. The fleet was breaking formation. For the first time in recorded history, the harvesters looked uncertain. They had never seen anything like this. No one had. The human voice continued, calm and steady. "To the vessels, you have one chance to withdraw. Leave this system now and we will not pursue. This is your only warning." Stared at her screen, unable to speak. Behind her was crying. All around the station were watching their sensors and trying to understand what they were seeing. The impossible had happened. Someone had answered the call. Far below, on the surface of 4, Prefect stood on his balcony and looked up at the sky. The shadow was still there, but now there was something else. A new light moving through the darkness, a star that was not a star. His comm unit was buzzing with frantic messages, but he ignored them. He just stood there, watching that single point of light challenge an armada of death. "What are you?" he whispered to the night. The answer came in fire and thunder. The humans had arrived. Captain gripped the arms of her command chair and watched the enemy fleet on the main screen. 217 ships. The computer had counted them 3 times to make sure. 217 harvesters, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a moon. Against them stood one ship, her ship, the Defiance. The bridge crew was silent. They had all seen the numbers. They all knew what those numbers meant, but nobody suggested turning back. They had not traveled through the void, through that screaming darkness between dimensions, just to run away. Commander said, "Status report." Her first officer pulled up the damage readings on his console. His face was tired and pale. The trip through had been hard on everyone. "Hull integrity at 73%, Captain. We lost 4 crew members during the crossing. Engines are running hot but stable. Weapons are online. Shields are functional." Functional, not good. Not optimal, just functional. It would have to be enough. "They are not responding to our warning," Lieutenant Park reported from the communications station. "They are charging weapons." Nodded, she had not expected them to run. They had never faced opposition. They were used to helpless victims, not warships. They probably thought one ship was no threat at all. They were about to learn differently. "All hands," said, her voice carrying through every speaker on the ship. "This is the captain. 19 days ago, we received a distress call from a species called the 8 billion civilians. No military, no allies willing to help them. The Concordat told us to ignore it. They said they were already dead." She stood up from her chair and looked around the bridge. Every officer was watching her. "I have a problem with that," she continued. "I have a problem with a galaxy that lets children die because helping them is too hard. I have a problem with treaties that protect everyone except the people who need protection most. And I have a problem with anyone who thinks humans will just stand by and watch." She turned back to the main screen. The ships were moving into attack formation. 200 warships, ancient and terrible, preparing to destroy the tiny vessel that dared to challenge them. "We crossed a dimension of nightmares to get here," said. "Some of us did not survive the trip. We did it because someone called for help and no one else would answer. That is who we are. That is what humans do. We answer the call." She sat back down and gripped her chair. "Now let's show these harvesters what happens when they pick on someone who fights back. Battle stations." The Defiance surged forward. On the orbital station, Ambassador watched in disbelief as the human ship accelerated toward the enemy fleet. It was suicide. 1 ship against 200. The math did not work. The outcome was certain. But the humans did not seem to care about math. They opened fire first. 100 ships launched their weapons at once. Beams of energy that could melt through any known armor. Missiles that tracked their targets through dimensions. The most destructive arsenal in the galaxy, all focused on one small vessel. The Defiance twisted. Had never seen a ship move like that. It rolled and dove and spun, its engines burning in ways that should have been impossible. The human crew inside must have been experiencing forces that would kill most species. But they kept moving, kept dodging, slipping through the barrage like water through fingers. And they fired back. The Defiance had weapons that the Concordat had never seen before. Cannons that fired projectiles wrapped in unstable energy fields. Missiles that seemed to learn from each failed attempt, adjusting their approach in real time. Something that looked like lightning but moved through the vacuum of space as if vacuum meant nothing. The first ship exploded. gasped. The harvesters had not lost a ship in combat for over 1,000 years. Their armor was legendary. Their shields were impenetrable. The Defiance had penetrated them anyway. Another ship fell, then another. The human vessel was dancing through the enemy formation, getting so close that they risked hitting each other with every shot. It was a crazy strategy, reckless and dangerous and utterly insane. It was working. Hal whispered beside her, "How are they doing this?" Shook her head. She did not know. She had studied human technology before. It was decades behind most Concordat species. Their ships were slower, their weapons were weaker, their shields were primitive. But the humans had something else, something that did not show up on technical specifications. They had will. On the bridge of the Defiance, alarms were screaming. A beam had punched through the port shields and opened a hole in Deck 7. Another hit had taken out 3 of the secondary weapons systems. The ship was bleeding atmosphere and crew members. Captain did not order a retreat. "Navigation," she called out. "Bring us in closer, right down their throats." "Captain," Commander said carefully, "if we get any closer, we will be inside their minimum firing range. But so will they. The crossfire will be intense." "I know." Watched another enemy ship die on her screen. 12 down, 205 to go. But they have never fought an enemy that was willing to die. They do not know what to do with us. That is our advantage. She pointed at the center of the formation, where the largest ships waited. The command cluster, the brains of the harvesting operation. That is our target. We kill those ships and the rest will scatter. They cannot function without coordination. Captain said quietly, "We may not survive that approach." Looked at him. Her eyes were hard, but there was no madness in them, just certainty. "Then we make the approach worth it." She opened a channel to the enemy fleet. "Attention, command. I'm going to give you one more chance because I believe in being fair. Withdraw now and you can leave with most of your fleet intact. Stay and we will destroy you. Not because we have to, because we choose to. Because you came here to murder 8 billion people and humans take that personally." The response came as 100 more weapons firing at once. Smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Helm, take us in." The Defiance dove into the heart of the enemy fleet, and the battle entered its terrible second phase. Behind her, through the windows of the orbital station, watched fire bloom against the darkness of space. She did not know if the humans could win. She did not know if anyone could win against those numbers. But for the first time in 72 hours, she allowed herself to feel something other than despair. For the first time, she felt hope. The battle had been going on for 4 hours. The Defiance was burning. Holes covered her hull like wounds in flesh. Atmosphere leaked from a dozen breaches. 3 of her 4 main engines were damaged. Her shields had failed completely an hour ago, and now every hit tore directly into her armor. She was still fighting. On the bridge, Captain wiped blood from her forehead. A console had exploded nearby and shrapnel had cut her face. She did not notice the pain. There was no time for pain. "Status," she ordered. Commander pulled himself up from the floor. His arm was hanging at a wrong angle, broken when the last impact had thrown him across the room. He checked his console with his good hand. 47 enemy ships destroyed, Captain. We have lost weapons systems on decks 3 through 8. Main cannons are at 30% capacity. Missiles are almost gone. Crew hesitated. 31 dead, over 100 wounded. 31 closed her eyes for one moment. 31 men and women who had followed her through the void and would never go home. She knew all their names. She knew their families. Later, if there was a later, she would mourn them properly. Right now, she had a job to finish. "The command cluster," she said. "How close are we?" "Close, Captain. But they know what we are trying to do. They have pulled their heaviest ships into a defensive formation around the command vessels." On the main screen, could see it. 20 of the largest harvesters had formed a wall between the Defiance and its target. They were pouring fire into the human ship, trying to finish her off before she could get any closer. "They are scared," said. "Looked at her, Captain. Look at them. They have changed their entire formation to stop us. They pulled ships away from the harvesting rigs. They are reacting to us, not the other way around. They are scared." She stood up from her chair. Blood was running down her face, but she ignored it. She looked at her bridge crew. They were battered and bruised, some barely able to stand. But they were all still at their stations, still fighting. "They have conquered 1,000 worlds," said. "They have never faced an enemy that kept coming. They do not know what to do with someone who is not afraid to die. That is what we are. We are the thing they never expected." She turned to her tactical officer. "Lieutenant Park, what weapons do we have left?" Park checked her console. "The main cannons are barely working. We have 12 missiles. The point defense systems are still online and—" She paused. "We have the mining charges, Captain, in Cargo Bay 4. We loaded them for the colony project we were supposed to support." Mining charges, not weapons, tools designed to break apart asteroids, but they were powerful, very powerful. "How many?" asked. 50, enough to crack a small moon." Smiled. It was the same smile she had shown the before, the one that was not nice at all. "Arm them." Grabbed her arm. "Captain, you are not thinking of—" "I am," looked at him calmly. "We cannot break through their defensive line with the weapons we have left, but if we get close enough, those charges will do the job. We will have to get inside their formation. We will have to ram them." "Yes. We will die." Was quiet for a moment. On the screen, the fleet continued to fire. Below them, 8 billion people waited to see if they would live or die. A whole world hanging on what happened in the next few minutes. "Maybe," she said finally. "Or maybe we break through and get away. Or maybe we damage them enough that they run. I do not know what will happen, Commander, but I know what happens if we do nothing. Those people down there die. All of them, including the children." She looked around the bridge at her crew. Nobody looked away. Nobody asked to abandon the mission. "Does anyone want to leave?" she asked. "The escape pods are still working. You can go now and no one will blame you." Silence. Then Lieutenant Park spoke up, her voice steady despite the cut on her cheek. "With respect, Captain, we did not cross the void to run away." Released his grip on her arm. He straightened up, holding his broken limb against his chest. "Orders, Captain." Sat back down in her chair. "All hands prepare for close combat. We are going through that wall." The Defiance changed course. Her damaged engines screamed as they pushed the wounded ship forward. They saw her coming and doubled their fire. Beams of energy cut through the hull. Explosions ripped through deck after deck. On the orbital station, watched with tears streaming down her face. The human ship was being torn apart. She could see the holes in its armor, the flames pouring from its wounds. It should have been dead already. Any Concordat ship would have been dead long ago. But the Defiance kept coming. The Hive Admiral sent a transmission. It was the first time the Harvesters had spoken since the battle began. "Human vessel, you are destroyed. Surrender and we will end your pain quickly." Captain's response was broadcast across every frequency. Every on the planet heard it. Every Concordat species monitoring the battle heard it. It would be repeated in history books for the next 1,000 years. "You came here to harvest 8 billion people. You thought they were helpless. You thought no one would stop you. You were wrong. We are 2,000 humans in a broken ship, and we are going to make you regret ever entering this system. You want us to surrender? Come and take us." The Defiance crashed into the defensive line. The first ship tried to move out of the way. It was too slow. The human vessel hit it at full speed, and the mining charges exploded on contact. The blast destroyed both ships and 3 more nearby. But the Defiance was not dead. Somehow, impossibly, the front section survived the impact. It tumbled through the explosion, burning and broken, and hit the next ship in line. More charges, more destruction. The formation shattered. They ran. For the first time in 10,000 years, the harvesters fled from a battle, not because they had lost more ships than they could afford, not because victory was impossible. They ran because they were facing something they had never encountered before. An enemy that would not stop, an enemy that was more afraid of abandoning the innocent than of dying. They ran because, finally, they understood fear. And in the wreckage of the battle, floating among the debris of a dozen destroyed ships, the remains of the Defiance drifted toward the planet she had saved. Her engines were dead, her weapons were gone, most of her hull was missing. But her emergency beacon was still blinking. The humans were still alive. The rescue ships found the Defiance drifting in a field of debris. Ambassador was on the first shuttle to reach the wreck. She ignored every safety protocol. She ignored her staff telling her to wait for the rescue teams to declare the ship safe. She needed to see it with her own eyes. She needed to understand. The shuttle docked with what remained of the human vessel. Most of the ship was gone, ripped away by explosions and enemy fire. What survived was barely enough to hold atmosphere. The rescue teams had to cut through twisted metal just to reach the interior. Followed them through the damaged corridors. Bodies lay where they had fallen. Human bodies still at their stations, still holding their weapons. They had died fighting, every single one of them. She found Captain on the bridge. The human commander was sitting in her chair, her arm in a makeshift bandage, her face covered in dried blood. Around her, the surviving crew members were working to stabilize the ship. Medical teams were treating the wounded. Engineers were trying to restore basic life support. Looked up when entered. Her eyes were tired, but there was something in them that made want to look away, something fierce and unbroken. Ambassador said, her voice was rough. Sorry about the mess. We were not expecting visitors. Stood in front of her. Words would not come. She had prepared speeches in her mind during the shuttle ride. Thank yous and expressions of gratitude and formal diplomatic statements. Now all of that seemed pointless. Why? She finally asked. It was the only question that mattered. Looked at her for a long moment. You called for help. Everyone calls for help. No one answers. We answered. But why? You did not know us. We had never done anything for you. The Concordat told you to ignore us. Your own survival said to ignore us. Why did you come? Was quiet. She looked around the ruined bridge at her surviving crew. 47 of them had died. Another 100 were wounded. The ship that had been her home for 12 years was a wreck. When I was a child, she said slowly, there was a fire in our apartment building. I was 8 years old. The building was burning and everyone was running for the exits. But there was a family on the floor above us. A woman and her 2 children. They were trapped. She paused, remembering. My father went back for them. Everyone told him not to. They said it was too dangerous. They said help would arrive soon and the professionals would handle it. But my father knew the truth. Help would not arrive in time, so he went back. Did he save them? Asked. Nodded. He got them out. He burned his hands badly. He carried those scars for the rest of his life, but he got them out. She looked at with those fierce, tired eyes. Later I asked him why he did it, why he risked his life for strangers when no one else would. Do you know what he told me? Shook her head. He said, someone has to be the one who goes back. Someone has to be the one who answers. If everyone waits for someone else, no one will ever help anyone. So he decided that he would be that person. He would be the one who answers. Stood up slowly. Her injuries made the movement painful, but she did not let it show. That is who humans are, Ambassador. We are the ones who go back. We are the ones who answer. Not because it is safe, not because it is smart, but because someone has to. Because if we do not, then what is the point of all our strength? Felt tears on her face again. She did not wipe them away. 47 of your people died for us. How can we ever repay that? You cannot, said simply. And we do not want you to. We did not come here for payment. We came because it was the right thing to do. She put her uninjured hand on shoulder. But if you really want to honor them, do this. The next time someone calls for help, do not look away. Do not wait for someone else to answer. Be the one who goes back. Pass it on. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. The Concordat species were shocked. They had written off the humans as primitive troublemakers. They had laughed at human technology and human aggression and human foolishness. Now they watched the recordings from 4, and they did not laugh. One ship against 200. A journey through a dimension of madness. A crew that refused to retreat even when their vessel was being torn apart around them. The humans had done what no one else would do, what no one else could do. The Concordat sent diplomats to Earth within a week. They offered full membership in the galactic community. They offered technology exchanges and trade agreements and seats on councils that humans had never been allowed to join. The humans accepted, but they had one condition. The treaties would be rewritten. From now on, when a distress call came, someone would answer. Always. No exceptions. No excuses. No looking away while innocent people died because helping them was too hard. The Concordat agreed. They had seen what humans did to those who preyed on the helpless. They did not want to be next. On 4, they built a memorial, a great statue of the Defiance, rising from the ground like a phoenix from ashes. Below it, they carved the names of the 47 humans who died so that 8 billion strangers could live. Prefect stood at the dedication ceremony and looked up at the statue. Children were playing nearby, the same children who had hidden in shelters and waited for death. They were laughing now. They were alive. Because someone had answered. The humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest or the most advanced, but they had something that no other species seemed to have. A willingness to sacrifice themselves for people they had never met. A stubborn refusal to accept that some people were not worth saving. In the years that followed, other species learned to look at the stars differently. The void was still dark and dangerous, but now there was something else out there, something that watched over the helpless, something that answered when no one else would. The humans called it duty, they called it honor, they called it being human. The rest of the galaxy just called it hope. And somewhere on a rebuilt ship called the Defiance II, Captain returned to the stars. There were other distress calls waiting, other people who needed help, other impossible battles to fight. She would answer them all. That was who she was. That was who humans would always be.